Welcome to the presentation of this wonderful recording of, that was the applause, of Arturo Nieto-Dorantes of Albéniz Iberia. Monsieur et Madame, bienvenue tous à cette présentation du magnifique CD d'Arturo Nieto-Dorantes, Iberia d'Albéniz. And let's start with a performance by our fantastic featured pianist. We listen to your performance, Arturo. Thank you so much.
Hello. Yeah, I will be performing for you three pieces out of this CD. The first one will be Rondena from the second book. After that will be Lava Pièce, which is from the third book. And finally, I'll be playing Navarra, which should have been in the fourth book. We'll talk about it after.
Bravo!
Bravo.
Et maintenant, j'ai le plaisir de présenter Madame Carmen Bernier, qui est la doyenne de la faculté de musique de l'Université Laval. Bienvenue, Madame, et mes félicitations.
Merci beaucoup. Buenos noches, good evening, bonsoir. Tout d'abord, je veux vous remercier d'être parmi nous ce soir et c'est un honneur et un plaisir de vous accueillir dans cette salle de concert qui est si familière à Arturo, la salle de concert de la faculté de musique de l'Université Laval. J'aimerais également adresser quelques mots de remerciement à toute l'équipe qui a rendu possible la réalisation, la production, la distribution de ce magnifique disque Iberia. Enfin, au nom de tous les collègues de la faculté et de l'Université Laval, au nom de nos étudiants Arturo de la faculté, en particulier la classe de piano, en mon nom personnel, une immense reconnaissance pour ton talent, mais aussi et surtout pour ta générosité envers nous tous. Tu fais une différence significative dans notre faculté. Tu inspires et diriges de nombreux étudiants qui deviennent de meilleurs artistes, de meilleurs pianistes, de meilleurs musiciens. Alors, c'est un très grand privilège que de travailler, de côtoyer Arturo Nieto-Dorantes au quotidien. Et je veux rappeler que chaque moment de prestation d'Arturo sont des moments de grandes rencontres artistiques et musicales. Merci, thank you, muchas gracias, Arturo.
Merci, merci. Énorme. Merci.
Thank you so much, Madame Bernier. Arturo, we are so happy to be part of this wonderful presentation. And I would like to ask you about the genesis of the project, because, I mean, this is one of the most monumental works in the piano repertoire, and it's a score that is full of secrets. And you have not only solved the secrets, but brought a breath of poetry into each note. So tell us about your journey.
Well, as you know, I've always had a certain attraction for music that has to do with folklore. I recorded a long time ago a CD that was about Latin American folklore in concert and piano music. And at that time, you know, we were talking about the internet prehistory. That means I had to travel all the way to the United States, and I went to the Bloomington Library to get some scores because, you know, they just weren't available. We're talking about the time before IMSLP, right, where you can get absolutely everything. Now, at that time, I had to look in, you know, several libraries for scores and find stuff that had to do with folklore, but was not just about folklore. It wasn't just a melody accompaniment, or it wasn't just a piece composed by a Latin American composer that was completely European-like. It was supposed to be some kind of a balance. My point of comparison, of course, was Manuel Ponce, who is our Mexican composer, and who succeeded in that balance wonderfully. So after I did that, I went into Manuel Ponce's work, and I performed right here in this hall, the whole integral of Ponce's music. That was the first time that anybody did it outside of Mexico. So we're talking about 8 recitals. So it was a whole lot of music that I played in 1 year. So it was one recital of different music every month. And with an eclectic composer such as Manuel Ponce, it was not only a delight, but also it was an adventure to do that. But of course, after dealing with Mexican folklore and Latin American folklore, I wanted to go deeper in the roots. And that's how I decided to go into something that was probably one of the biggest adventures that I have ever done, and most pianists have ever done playing piano, and which is Iberia by Albéniz, which is one of the hardest collections they can play on a stage. And not only to play, to perform, but just to read it is already an adventure. That's how it all started, you know, that interest into
Iberia.
Thank you so much. And Marisa, I mean, as director of Urtext and having built one of the largest catalogs of music from Mexico, Latin America, we could say from the Spanish-speaking world, what does it mean to have such a distinguished Mexican pianist performing a Spanish, I would say a universal masterpiece, such as Iberia in your catalog of more than 400 CDs or around 400 productions?
Well, first of all, I want to congratulate Arturo because this performance that we just witnessed is really just a little taste of what it is to enjoy the whole production of this recording, to sit down and listen to the complete suites is quite the adventure also for the listener. And it is a great privilege for our label to welcome you with this new production. We are not welcoming you to the catalog because this is your second production with our label. And the first one was with Cuarteto Latinoamericano. And our mission since the beginning of time, long time ago, was to give a platform, to give this way to disseminate and to share with the world the work of our brilliant performers and composers. And what pleasure it has been. These 26, almost 26 years since I founded this label has been also an adventure for me. And each one of the releases has a whole history attached to it. So each one of the releases, each one of the titles, each one of the references has a history of its own. And to have this one that is so deeply a part of you is such a privilege for us. So thank you, for trusting us and trusting in our hands such a big endeavor of your life. So congratulations and
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for welcoming me and for having this project in your catalog. And yes, it was this is probably the biggest project that I've ever done since, let's say a very high percentage of it was made by me. And of course, the technological side and everything, I have to, first of all, thank, he's not here tonight, but I hope he hears us, Serge Sanson, who is the sound engineer and the one who did the edition, who put the whole puzzle together. I did the listening and, of course, the playing, and he did all the edition. And it's amazing the kind of work that he did. He's a guitarist. And he is not acquainted to Albéniz. And the kind of work he got into is amazing. It's just amazing what he did.
I can guarantee you he now is.
Definitely.
I remember the first time I heard Arturo Nieto-Dorantes when he was, I guess, almost still a teenager. It was at the Angelica Morales competition. And someone sitting next to me asked me about what I thought of the pianist. I said, oh, this is a very good pianist. This pianist has very good technique. And I mentioned 2 or 3 names. And then, puzzled, he asked me, well, what about Arturo? And I said, Arturo is a poet. He will be the winner. And he was the winner. But part of the conversation that I wanted to have with you is how you have brought poetry to each note. Albéniz was also a man full of fantasy that not only created music, but also created his persona. And many of the anecdotes now we know that are not true. And it's very hard to really reconstruct the music because it's not only the manuscript or the first edition, but really the poetic spirit. At the time, his teacher, Pedrell, thought that the most important achievement for a composer was to write an opera. And he was the one who introduced Wagner to Catalonia and to Spain, and who wanted Albéniz and Falla and Granados to write a masterpiece for the opera. At the end, the masterpiece is Iberia. And it's not an opera, but it's such a complex world. It's like it has theater, it has dance, it has drama, it has poetry. Albéniz, along with Gustavo Adolfo Bécquer, defined Spanish Romanticism. And you have in your blood the heritage of a father and a mother who are also distinguished singers and dear friends. So tell me about the voice, the theater, and poetry.
For me, it was a whole experience, because actually part of the genesis of the project wasn't only piano, but also the fact of getting aboard, working on Iberia was bringing back so many memories from my parents. My father, who's a fantastic baritone, and my mother, a high soprano. They were high celebrities in Mexican opera. But not only did they perform in opera, they also sang in zarzuela, which is a Spanish operetta, the Spanish nationalistic operetta. And the one thing that is really interesting is that if we consider that Albéniz is a balance of all of those elements, it's not only Spanish music, but as you well said, he was influenced by Pedrell, the man who stayed in the shadow, as a matter of fact, because, everybody knows about Granados, everybody knows about Albéniz, but few people know about Pedrell and his, the few works that went to history. But the heritage of this nationalistic essence that went through history was something that stayed a little bit in the stereotype of people, because of course they think Albéniz and they think immediately Spanish music, flamenco. And the one thing that happened throughout his life is that he had to deal with the fact that every time he performed outside of Spain, people would criticize him because he didn't look or sound or have the character, the typical Spanish wild performer. He was this elegant, really refined pianist who would play with subtleties and using the instrument and its best in terms of the elegance. So it really didn't fit with what they were expecting from a Spanish pianist or a composer, except, of course, of the fact that he was including some guitar effects and some flamenco effects in his piano compositions. So what happened to me personally is that during my how would you call that? Année d'études de recherche in English. That's
research.
Pardon me?
Yeah, the research.
Research leave, that's right.
Sabbatical research.
Right. Sabbatical research. I did a master's degree in Spanish music interpretation in Madrid and at the Centro Superior Catarina Gurska. And at the same time, I was that master's degree was synchronized with the Academia Marshall, which is in Barcelona. The Academia Marshall, as you well know, is school that was created by Enrique Granados and taken over by Frank Marshall, his student. And after that, the next director was none other than Alicia de la Rocha, who stayed there for a very long time. Nowadays, the one who is being the director there is Marta Zabaleta, whom I took lessons with for Iberia. And it was really interesting. At the same time, I was taking my main mentor was Gustavo Díaz-Querés, who is an amazing pianist, but also a composer. So I had those two visions at the same time, the Alicia de la Rocha style and the composer style. And simultaneously, I did a research project of which I wrote a dissertation on the construction of an interpretation of Iberia. For that, I had the privilege of interviewing 5 people. And those 5 people who really I had the privilege to talk to where Gustavo Díaz-Jerez, Marta Zabaleta, Guillermo González. Guillermo González is the editor of the first Urtext edition of Iberia. And we'll talk about it later if you want, because it's really interesting to say that the edition that existed until 1999, from 1909 until 1999, was the Spanish version, full of mistakes, full of flaws all over the place. And that was the one that served as material for all the recordings that we all know, especially Alicia La Rocha.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Full of flaws, full of mistakes, full of really weird things. It's incredible that it survived like that, because what Guillermo González did is that he thought, well, it's impossible to be using this material. We have to use something more serious. So he started doing some research and trying in order to make his own edition. So what he did is that he started looking for manuscripts. And in that research, he started finding manuscripts all over the place, all over the world. He even went to the Library of Congress in Washington to get them, to get El Puerto. So, and he had to pay for all those manuscripts. It's got a lot of merit. So what he did is that he edited that Urtext edition, the one printed edition that's probably one of the best ones nowadays. A second volume with his arrangements, because as you will notice probably, is music that is extremely complex for the piano, but it's even more complex when you read it. What happened when Albéniz composed this piece is that he was already a broad pianist, but he was already a composer pianist. Before that, he would compose things that he could play, but when he composed in 1906, he was really deeply in a terrible health. He was about to die. He knew that. So he did his masterpiece in about 3 years, in between 3-4 years, in which, if we count the times that he didn't compose anything because he was sick, it was probably composed in 1.5 years. So such a masterwork to be composed in such a short time, you could imagine a manuscript that was full of, how do you call that? Yeah, corrections and things like that. It's flawless. The manuscript is absolutely flawless. It's amazing. You can use it to a piece. So it's amazing that also it's incredible that there was an edition that was so terrible that lasted for 90 years. That was the only material when there was a manuscript that was really, people who had it were protecting it as a gold. They didn't want it to get out because they were scared that it would be lost. Instead of that, Guillermo González succeeded into making this edition in which he printed the facsimile of the manuscript. That's an amazing thing, because when you get that edition, you get 3 volumes. So I think that's incredible. And I had the privilege to talk to him. That was one of the people I interviewed, and it was really interesting to talk to him. The other 2 people I talked to was French pianist Hervé Biot, who's a Marguerite Long Prize winner, and who did his own recording from the French perspective, and Blanca Uribe, who's a Colombian fantastic legend, and who recorded also that piece as well. So I took pretty much the 5 perspectives and everything else that is associated to a dissertation. And I learned so much of it, besides the fact that I was already studying everything about folklore and flamenco. I'm not special. I didn't become a specialist. Forget about it. Flamenco is something that's absolutely out there. But I got a little idea of how it worked. So when you know all that, you start playing Albéniz and you look at it differently.
Of course.
Because there are things that are and those that are not. And that just sound like it. He did something that Bartók did later. That he essence and he reinvented folklore.
Right.
So we're talking about a piece that is already hard to read, because he was thinking of it as you could tell that it's almost a piano reduction. And you see going like this and like that, and you wonder which finger you're going to use. You end up doing arrangements all over the place.
It's actually very orchestral.
It's very orchestral. Actually, he did an orchestration of, I think, the first book, or if I'm mistaken, probably the first two books he orchestrated. But his orchestrations, had little problems as well. They were criticized, but that's another deal. That's something else. But you could tell that he was thinking of something abroad piano.
Right.
Something really beyond. So it's hard to read, it's hard to perform, and it's hard to understand, because you can't sit and say, well, I'm going to play Spanish music, I'm going to go wild. No, you have to think that Albéniz also went to the Schola Cantorum, and he was a student of Vincent d'Indy. Mm-hmm. And as a student of Vincent d'Indy, he was also, got close to Palestrina and really conservative French standard music at that time. So very serious stuff. He liked Wagner. So how you deal with Wagner, Palestrina, Scarlatti that he loved, mm-hmm. and Spanish flamenco? You have to take all that into account when you perform this. So it goes way beyond the score. Okay. So you have the score, it's already hard to understand and to perform. You have everything else to think of. And even then, of course, I must confess, when I speak a language, I try to do it, the best possible, the best pronunciation. But it's a little bit as if a Mexican was trying to do the Spanish accent. And it could sound fake. Some people could succeed. I didn't succeed. Personally, I didn't even try to start with. But it's a little bit, when you perform this music, it's like playing Spanish music and trying to evoke the right accent. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, to what point are you supposed to do that also?
Exactly. That's a very good question. And besides, musicologist Jacinto Torres said that it's not Spanish music. It's music written by a French musician, right?
It was a Spanish writing in French music.
Right. Spanish writing, French music. Exactly. Yes.
Exactly.
So I think that the mixture and the combination of that only enriches the performance. I don't think it takes anything away. I think enriches the performance, because unlike fake accents in spoken language, I think music, being a truly universal language, can only be enriched by the serious approach that a good musician gives to the work. So I'm not talking about, artificial or superficial things. I'm talking about a very serious study like the one you did for the work. And I think that your contribution is huge.
Yeah, I could compare the score of Iberia to a Mahler symphony.
Oh yes, definitely.
It's very easy to get lost in all the little details and lose sight of the horizon. So sometimes if you want to put all those mannerisms, you get a myopic interpretation that tries to mimic the castagnette or the Toto dance of stomping flamenco. You have to look at the horizon, you have to look at the sea, you have to look at the sky, and in your beautiful Guayabera, we can see that the glue of poetry is inhabiting in your performance.
I've decided to wear Guayaberas lately because not only are they, they have a real nice look, they're very comfortable. When you play Iberia, I thought it was very important to be comfortable, because when you perform Iberia complete on stage, you have to be comfortable and fresh, and a Guayabera is perfect for that.
I remember we met Guillermo González, who also studied at Schola Cantorum and Conservatoire in a beautiful olive grove of a friend of ours near Granada in Andalusia, and such a wonderful, generous colleague.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We talked for hours, and he didn't spare any moment. He just talked and shared all the information he had. It was amazing. I was really privileged during my year in Spain. And that's thanks to the Université Laval, who they brought me there. And I did that, funded by the Université Laval. that was a really nice adventure to get to, and that's how I got to learn how to perform. And I got to perform it quite often over there. In 1 year, I played it about 12 times.
Wow.
And I would have played it even more, but the pandemic came. So.
Really? Whoa.
So now it's time to celebrate. And again, in when we see in politics and in the world the need to get together and the need to look at a certain nationalism, like Sir Walter Scott or Ponce in Mexico or Albéniz, who's not about one region, but about the spirit of a time and about bringing all the people together. Because, of course, he was Catalonian, but his father came from the Basque Country. He traveled all over the world. And the same thing we can say of Granados, and the same thing we can say of Ponce, that sometimes we don't know if something is a melody that he picked up or he created a melody that then the people made theirs. And that's the positive side of authentic nationalism.
Definitely. That was during the time Granados and Albéniz went to study in Madrid, and they took all the pan-Spanish music into their genes, basically. Mm-hmm. So it was another time. Of course, times changing. But on that time, there were two composers who were really Spanish in their DNA, let's call it.
In a way, don't you think it's a shame that Pedrell sort of despised a little bit Zarzuela, because he gave his students this real big interest for the big music, for the Wagnerian type of opera, and I think that the attempts that they did to complete these big projects, such as the Atlantida in the case of the Falla, it was a huge flop. And I think that if Albéniz would have felt that he could have written Zarzuela, he would have been incredibly successful, don't you think?
Well, actually, Pepita Jimenez is supposed to be some kind of a zarzuela.
Yeah, there's another version that Pepita Jimenez commits suicide so that it doesn't.
Right. But the odd thing is that even though it's more Spanish in its sound, it's still Wagner-like. The orchestration, the melodies are just absolutely not important. Everything was in the middle of the texture. That's one of the problems. One of the reasons that pushed Albéniz out of the stage as an opera composer. His melodies wasn't so memorable. Yeah, and I think from a standpoint, people must have felt kind of strange. Of course, we're talking about borders and nationalities and everything, but they must have felt somewhat puzzled to see an opera that sounded like Wagner, composed by a Spanish composer, and with a libretto in English, because the guy who was funding him, Francis Monicotz, was an English guy who was funding Albéniz. He funded him all his life, and even after he died, he still gave a rent to his wife, to his widow. But in exchange, Albéniz was supposed to use all of his librettos in English. That's why Merlin is in English, and most of the stage works that Albéniz composed are in English. So it's sort of a strange mix that probably didn't help Albéniz, which pushed him to put away stage music and go back to the piano with La Vega.
Well, global avant la lettre.
That's right. But on the other hand, that was a big gain. I mean, I'm not saying that his stage works were not good, but the way he went back to the piano, when we look at La Vega, which is kind of the embryonic version of
Iberia.
Was going to be Iberia. It's something. It's a beautiful piece that sounds a lot like Debussy, but also has a little bit of Scarlatti in it, with a fandango rhythm.
Yeah.
And he uses resources, and that's really amazing. And I'm not sure if many people know that, but many people notice that. But he uses piano resources that Debussy hadn't even used himself. And Debussy, was one of the composers who actually used new resources out of the piano in terms of sounds and use of the pedal and everything. And Albéniz was doing that before. So it's amazing. Albéniz, as a composer, as a user of the instrument, is absolutely amazing. And then when we go into Iberia, it's a whole thing that comes into place. It's a masterwork that, I played a lot of music. I've barely seen music that is so complex and so well written.
Right, and so innovative. I mean, over 100 years later, we're still marveling at the innovations that he introduced. I can't imagine how people felt at that time to listen to these things for the first time and wondering what was he thinking or what was he doing and how did he come up with these incredible ideas,
Can you imagine the first time that anybody heard Lava Pièce? That's why I chose it. I mean, actually, I chose probably my favorite 3 pieces nowadays, I guess. But especially because Lava Pièce, I find it's extremely original. The fact that he's imitating a street organ.
Yes.
That sounds completely out of tune. That's why he puts so many wrong notes in music and the canons. And suddenly, because as you probably know, Lava Pièce, where he lived, that's a neighborhood in Madrid. And that time was a really dangerous place. There were, bandits, and there were prostitutes, and it was a dangerous place in Madrid. And he lived there. So when I hear Pichi, esto que castiga. That kind of music that's really Madrid and that has the accent of Madrid. The people who used to live in that time, people have changed, of course. But in that time, of course, at least the stage people would speak with this kind of fun accent, really marked.
Yes.
And that I see that in Lava Pièces. But the way he integrates all these dissonances and this is harmony in such an original way. He even invents a new chord, the Iberic chord, that many people call the Iberic chord, which is a mix in between a French sixth and a German sixth. You put that together, that gives you a big dissonance in the middle. And that's something he invented. He puts it all the time, since all the pieces are in a ternary structure, almost a sonata form. When he goes back, when he goes into the recapitulation, right before he comes back, he puts that chord. And it's tension, big tension. And he does that every time. So he's a very original composer, extreme, from every standpoint.
Yeah.
And it's hardest to perform the whole thing.
Well, it doesn't show.
It takes a lot of work. That was part of the adventure, was to learn to survive it on stage as well.
To make it yours.
Yeah, because I discovered in that dissertation that not many people have tried it. I counted 60 people in the whole 12 since the piece has existed. Just 60 pianists have attempted to play the whole thing. If we count the people who have played the Beethoven sonatas, that's a lot more. And if of course, we consider also the recordings, there's quite a bit. But it's also interesting to see that not everybody has tried that. Many big pianists, such as Daniel Barenboim, for example, he's a great pianist, but he's only recorded 2 books. Third artist, Gustavo Diaz-Jerez, told me that probably the 60 or 70% of the notes of the whole suite are in those 2 books, the third and the fourth.
Wow.
It's incredible, and it's really scary to play them on stage because it can get lost anywhere. And memory-wise, it's real hard. And play the whole suite takes about 1 hour and 20 minutes. So it takes a lot of memory, it takes a lot of endurance. It's a tour de force, but it's important not to play it for the tour de force.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, you have to enjoy it. And
That's right.
That's a whole process to make it yours to such a point where you almost don't think about it. You have to let your muscular memory do most of the work, and your innate, already ingrained in your, all the work that you have ingrained in your brain and in your muscles, do the whole thing.
It's really weird because I find it much easier to play the whole thing than to play just 3 pieces. Like tonight,
Of course.
it's much more scary because when you play the whole thing, you get warmed up. You have to, of course, save your energy. But
Pace yourself, yes.
that's right. But when you play just 3 pieces, it's especially after 1 year of almost not playing, right, because of the pandemic. So
When you're a marathon runner, it's hard to do a sprint.
that's right. That's right. That's right.
The one thing that I really enjoy of your performance is precisely this lightness and this subtlety, not only the full sound of the piano, but also the pianissimi. And that is something that we read that people celebrated in Albéniz's performance. And also what you mentioned, there's a little bit of Scarlatti, but also if we look at another friend of Pedrell, Francisco Asenjo Barbieri, well, he created the manolería, and he wrote this beautiful zarzuela, El Barberillo de Lavapiés, that was also put in literature by Don Ramón de la Cruz. And it's also one of the most, or was, and still is, one of the most mixed boroughs of Madrid, where you have gypsies and Jewish people and people now from China and the Middle East living together and bringing so many flavors.
That's right. That's right. The one thing I find really difficult is to go nowadays and see those places. And you have to imagine it more than, because those are places that have changed. When you see that the zarzuela, for example, during the time that Albéniz, that it was like that, and it's not all like that anymore.
No.
When you play Triana, for example, Triana is the neighborhood in Seville, the gypsy neighborhood. But it doesn't. Yes, it is gypsy. I got, well, not gypsy, but you see flamenco. Well, I got to see a flamenco player there that was in the middle of the street singing, like really out of his head. It was amazing. But of course, it's not what probably they saw at that time, and not all what you see in zarzuela. In zarzuela is magical because it's even deeper into dream world. I wanted to share that moment that I lived when I was in Madrid. I went to see Doña Francisquita, which is another zarzuela. And of course, musically speaking, the performance was beautiful. It was great. But, I respect when stage directors try to do new things. And we're talking about a new version in terms of stage that was modern and, it went away from the traditional thing that you imagine from Doña Francisquita. So suddenly, in the audience, there was a lady who went, "No, that's not Doña Francisquita. I don't like this," and she started screaming. But I was really amazed to see that the real zarzuela was in the audience because of the way. The character, the strong character you see in the Spanish people. Well, this lady had it, and she was like, "No, I didn't pay for this. I want to get my money back." And you have half of the audience clapping, and the other one going, "Shh." I think that's amazing to see because that's one thing you integrate in your music when you play something like Iberia that's so full of folklore.
Yeah.
And exactly, that you integrate high music and popular culture. And actually, if you go, or now, if you went to Lavapiés, you will see the statue of a musician there. But it's not Albéniz, it's Agustín Lara.
Lara, Mexican composer as well. That's right.
This has been a wonderful conversation. Marisa, I don't know if you have a final reflection or question for our featured artist.
Well, actually, I would like to know, after this huge project, what is your next project? What is your next project?
I feel like going back to Ponce. I feel like since I did the whole integral, I would be tempted, because there's just one integral so far that actually was recorded by my former teacher, my mentor Hector Rojas. He's the one who did it about 20 years ago, and it's the only complete version that exists. So right now there's a Spanish pianist who's doing it, Álvaro Sendoya, I heard, and he's doing it, but it's still in the second volume, so he's still got some way to go. So I wouldn't mind going to that, because I know very well how that works. And I think that now the means, before that I thought, 8 CDs, it's a lot of CDs. But now that we can put music online, I think it's much more handy to try that kind of a project. That would be my next project. Of course, I would like to play Iberia as much as possible. That's as long as as soon as the pandemic goes away. Of course, I want to go back on stage and play it. But I wouldn't mind going back to roots.
I guess very selfishly, I was asking about your next recording. So,
Oh, actually, I was going to propose it to you.
Well, we have witnesses now. We have witnesses.
And especially, we got all the right place here. The recording studio that we call the Laboratoire Audio Numérique de Recherche et Création, the LARC, we call it here, is an amazing. Well, you heard the product, and the work that Serge Sanson does is amazing. So we got all the right conditions for that. That's why I was tempted to getting into that kind of a project. So I'm in.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I mean, just talking about the audio technology part, we have already received comments that is recording at the highest level of fidelity. It's like as good as it gets internationally. And that's also very important now, because more people experience music through technology than in face-to-face concerts. So we need to have the best possible technology at the service of the artist. And Laval is one of the privileged places where research and creative research, performance, and technology come together under the guidance of Madame Bernier. Donc, mes félicitations à vous et toute votre équipe.
I wanted to add to that I had also really privileged conditions in terms of timing. When I did the interviews, the consensus was of the fact that, of course, you cannot do anything else, but when you record a CD, you usually do it in 3 days. And you do it sometimes in the middle of the night, because some recording places are churches or concert halls where there's traffic, there's airplanes, and you have to consider that to have everything silent. Here we have everything completely
Isolated.
Isolated, it's perfect. And one thing they told me, my 5 pianists, is that recording Iberia in 3-4 days is killing. It's really, really, exhausting. I had the privilege of recording 1 piece a week.
Oh, wow.
And of course, I heard what they told me, and I said, well, I'm going to take all my time. So I worked on every single piece so that I would have all the right conditions. And of course, Serge is such a great, not only great engineer, but also a great person. And sometimes I had really great guests in that cabin. One of them was Gustavo Díaz-Jerez himself, who came here last year with Javier Negrin, who's another great Spanish pianist. And they came here for our first Spanish music festival that we had here in Laval. on this stage. And Javier Negrin played Granados, the Goyescas. I played Iberia. And Gustavo played his compositions and played La Vega and the Falla, the Fantasia Bética. So it was a great situation, and he was in the cabin for Evocación.
Wow.
So when you hear the takes, you hear the inspiration from the mentor that I have. He's not only a great pianist and a great composer, he's a fantastic person. He's a wonderful person, that a really great friend.
Well, they are spoiling you there.
Oh, yes, definitely.
That's wonderful. Congratulations. And I want to invite the audience who will listen to this presentation. I want them to listen, to get into any streaming service that they use, and just enjoy these performances, because I will not call it a performance, I will call it performances, because you did it in a span of time that allowed you to do one by one, and it will be a voyage of discovery for anyone who sits down to listen to this music. So congratulations again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Very touched. Thank you very much.
Very well. So thank you very much for joining us today. Merci bien de nos acompañar ce soir. Muchas gracias por estar con nosotros. And let's have an immersive experience and listen to all of Albéniz masterpiece Iberia in the unique performance of the poet of the piano, Arturo Nieto-Dorantes. More soon.